The first sign that something was wrong did not come from any giant observatory or famous space station. It came from a quiet monitoring room where a single night shift worker watched the sky through a screen. He had been sitting there for hours, half expecting another calm night when a tiny alert appeared. It showed a strange object far beyond the orbit of Mars. At first, he thought it was a glitch. The signal was faint and uneven, almost like a random flicker of noise in deep space. But something about it didn't match natural behavior. It moved with purpose, not like a comet or asteroid. He zoomed in. The movement was too straight, too intentional, and far too fast. He called his supervisor without waiting. Soon, more eyes gathered around the screen. The room went silent. What they were seeing didn't make sense. It looked like an object with sharp edges, not round like a rock. It reflected sunlight in a way that suggested actual metal floating where no human craft had ever traveled. Within minutes, multiple observatories were contacted. Images from other telescopes confirmed the same thing. A strange metallic formation was entering the solar system. The first official report carried careful wording. It said an unidentified object was approaching from deep space. They avoided words like ship or craft. But even then, the scientists monitoring it knew something was different. Natural objects did not hold a perfect formation. They did not change direction with control. And they certainly didn't maintain equal distance from each other, like marching soldiers. The more the data came in, the more uncomfortable people felt. Across Earth, different space agencies noticed the same thing almost at the same moment. From agencies in America, Europe, and Asia to small research centers nobody had heard of, everyone saw the identical unusual reading. The message spread faster than expected, bouncing between government departments and high-security channels. When the truth became clear, a quiet pressure filled every room involved. It wasn't one object. It was a group. They were traveling together, and they were heading toward the inner planets. Word eventually reached the world's major leaders. A sudden emergency meeting was held behind closed doors, one that the public wouldn't hear about until much later. Representatives sat around a long table, listening to scientists explain the movement patterns. Every person inside the room understood the risk. The signals didn't show any sign of communication, no attempt at greeting. The approach was silent and direct. Someone asked if they should prepare for disaster. Another asked if this could be a new kind of natural event. A scientist shook his head. He displayed a chart showing how the objects changed path slightly to stay in formation. Rocks did not do that. Ice did not do that. Nothing natural moved with such precise intention. In the first few hours, nobody wanted to jump to conclusions. The world had seen enough movies about alien invasions to make people overly dramatic, but this time it didn't feel like fantasy. It felt controlled, cold, and strangely organized. Soon, satellites in deep space were repositioned to watch the objects more closely. The clearer the images became, the more uneasy everyone felt. The objects were symmetrical. They were built with angles no natural object could form. They even left faint trails of energy behind them, suggesting propulsion. Anyone who had even basic space knowledge could tell these things weren't simple drifting pieces of metal. They were vessels. And as they were getting closer, public panic had not started yet, because the world didn't know. But inside secret meeting rooms, the mood was changing fast. Experts looked at each other with expressions that said everything without speaking. This was not a friendly visit. This was not a harmless cosmic coincidence. Something intelligent was coming, and it wasn't slowing down. Across the planet, government buildings were suddenly filled with unusual activity. Military bases received coded alerts. Communication lines were opened that had not been used in decades. Quiet airfields lit up at night. Strange equipment was moved in sealed containers. Scientists were flown to secure locations under full confidentiality. All this happened while the outside world continued its normal routine. People went to work. Children went to school. Markets opened like usual. Nobody saw the silent storm rising behind the scenes. Within days, more detailed scans came through. The formation of the objects was large, much larger than any human spacecraft. Even the smallest one was bigger than an Earth battleship. They moved in a line, then shifted into a wide spread as if preparing for something. The pattern sent a shiver through the teams studying it. It looked like a tactical maneuver. There was no doubt anymore. This was a fleet dot, and it wasn't slowing. DOWN, a global emergency communication channel, something rarely used, was activated between the worlds. Largest space agencies. Scientists from different backgrounds, different languages, different cultures, all stared at the same terrifying data. They compared measurements. They double-checked numbers. They tried to find any explanation that didn't lead to the obvious conclusion. But each time, the answer was the same. Something was coming toward Earth. Something large, not something powerful. And something not from this planet. The first signs of real fear appeared when radar satellites detected changes in the fleet's speed. It wasn't random. They were adjusting course, as if planning their route into the inner solar system. Their destination was too early to predict exactly, but the direction was clear enough. The path lined up with Earth's orbit, inside one major agency. A senior scientist stood in front of a digital map showing the objects approaching from beyond Mars. He looked exhausted. He had barely slept in 2 days. His voice shook slightly as he spoke, but he remained steady enough to deliver the truth. If they maintain this speed and formation, he said, they will reach Mars orbit in less than 2 weeks. The room stayed silent. Everyone knew that if these unknown vessels crossed Mars orbit without stopping or changing direction, then there was no more doubt about their intention. Mars was the last calm zone. Beyond Mars lay the inner planets, Earth included. Suddenly the questions grew heavier. Why were they coming? Were they peaceful? Were they explorers? Or was this something darker? Nobody wanted to assume the worst, but the behavior of the fleet did not match peaceful contact. There were no signals, no attempts to communicate, no sign of slowing down. If anything, their approach became more steady and more confident. Some experts argued that maybe the ships didn't understand human communication technology, but others pointed out that any species capable of interstellar travel would not simply arrive without trying to make contact. Another long meeting was held, and this time the tone was more serious. Every major nation agreed that Earth needed a unified strategy, not individual plans. Old rivalries, political disputes, and long-standing tensions were set aside because the threat was bigger than any human conflict. A global defense coordination network was secretly activated. It connected military and scientific institutions across continents. Everyone involved was told the same thing: remain calm, remain silent, and prepare for the unknown. As the fleet moved closer, the first real panic came from inside the agencies themselves, not from the public. The public still had no idea what was happening, but the people working behind the scenes, the ones analyzing every movement, felt the very real possibility that Earth could face something far beyond its capabilities. Even with the fear, something unexpected began to happen. A sense of unity formed. People who had never met before worked side by side. Scientists who used to argue over small details now shared information freely. Leaders who normally debated over policy suddenly agreed without hesitation. Everyone understood one thing clearly: if the objects were hostile, then Earth had only one chance to stand together. Night after night, the people tracking the fleet barely slept. They watched as the objects got closer, moving past the outer edge of the asteroid belt. New data came in constantly, and every update confirmed the same frightening truth. This was not a mistake. This was not a harmless event. This was an approach. The final confirmation came when one of the objects emitted a burst of energy, almost like a pulse. It wasn't a weapon, but it showed intention. It showed capability. It showed technology far beyond anything humans had created. That was the moment when everyone understood they weren't just visiting the solar system. They were coming for Earth. Long before the strange objects ever entered the solar system, there had been whispers inside certain scientific circles. A decade earlier, unusual signals were detected far beyond Neptune. They were faint, almost like scratches in the background noise of the universe. Most people ignored them, thinking they were simple radio distortions. But a small group of experts felt something was off. The signals had patterns, small repeating details that didn't fit natural space noise. Those experts raised alarms quietly. They told their governments that something in deep space might be moving or communicating. Nothing clear, nothing that could be shown to the public, but enough to raise concern. And slowly, behind locked doors and soundproof walls, a secret project began to form. At first, the project was nameless. Only a handful of countries were involved. They agreed that whatever these unknown signals were, Earth needed a plan just in case. Slowly, more nations were invited. They all understood the importance of cooperation, even though none of them wanted the public to panic. Years passed, and the project grew into something much larger. It eventually became known internally as the Orbital Defense Array, but the world never heard that name. It was kept away from news channels, away from public speeches, and away from curious attention. Only people with the highest clearance levels even knew it existed. The idea behind the project was simple, but ambitious. Earth needed a shield. Not a shield in the sense of a huge barrier, but a system of weapons and sensors placed across orbit that could defend the planet against any threat, including something humanity had never seen before. Engineers worked in silence on powerful lasers that could be fired from space. Others focused on rail systems that could launch objects at incredible speeds, so fast they didn't need explosive warheads because the impact alone would be devastating. Robotic satellites were developed, advanced enough to move like insects in space, quickly repositioning when needed. Some parts of the project were so secret that even the engineers didn't know what the final system would look like. They only built their section. Everything was stitched together by a small command team who saw the full picture. And then there was the AI system. Not a talking machine, not a friendly companion, but a cold, calculation-based intelligence designed to think faster than any human. Its purpose was to analyze thousands of possible attack patterns in a fraction of a second. If anything unknown ever approached Earth, the AI would decide instantly how to respond. Even though all of this sounded like science fiction, it wasn't built for fantasy. It was built because the people behind the project had sensed something long before the rest of the world did. They didn't want fear to spread, so they worked quietly, building Earth's unseen defense. But even with all their secrecy, they never expected the fleet to arrive so soon. When the mysterious objects were detected beyond Mars, the entire hidden project woke up as if someone had flipped the switch. The silent bases, the locked hangars, the darkened control rooms, all of them suddenly came alive. Every expert who had ever worked on the project was called back. Some were woken in the middle of the night by special transport teams. Some were quietly picked up from their workplaces without anyone noticing. They were told nothing, only that they were needed immediately. Inside the main coordination center, the atmosphere was tense. People moved quickly, speaking in low voices. Screens showed the incoming fleet, growing clearer every hour. Nobody needed to say what they were thinking. The project they had worked on for years was no longer a preparation. It was now Earth's only real defense. Operators activated systems that had never been used outside of testing. Long metal structures in orbit began warming up. Massive laser platforms deep in space turned toward the incoming direction. Small robotic satellites zipped into new positions like a formation of tiny guardians. On the moon, hidden stations powered up, sending quiet signals back to Earth. The public knew nothing. If someone looked up at the sky, everything looked normal. But behind the scenes, humanity was building a wall that no one had ever told them about. This wasn't just about weapons. It was about coordination. The secret project had been designed so that all nations worked together if a threat ever appeared. It didn't matter who disagreed with who, or which countries had past tensions. In this moment, none of that mattered. Humanity itself was at risk. In a secure underground room, a group of specialists gathered around a large digital map. They studied the approaching fleet carefully. The objects weren't moving randomly. They were taking a direct path, as if they knew where they were going. The closer they got, the more certain everyone became that Earth was the destination. Someone pointed to the map. "If we activate too early, they'll see us preparing," he said. "If we wait too long, we'll lose our advantage." The room fell silent for a moment. Another person spoke calmly. "We need to act before they pass Mars. That is our best chance." Nobody disagreed. As the fleet approached, the true scale of the AEGI system, the system Earth had built in secret, became more visible. Silent platforms that had been hidden for years now drifted into position. Massive structures that the world had never heard of reached readiness. In orbit, long metal barrels extended outward from a station, disguised as harmless debris. A second platform unfolded panels that absorbed sunlight, storing power for the moment it would be needed. Even the moon, quiet and lifeless on the outside, hummed softly with machines buried deep below the surface. The people controlling these systems remained calm, but their faces showed the weight of what they were doing. They were not soldiers. They were scientists, engineers, analysts, people who had dedicated their lives to understanding the universe. And now, they were preparing to defend their planet from something completely unknown. Meanwhile, more data about the fleet arrived from outer sensors. The objects were massive, far larger than anything humans had built. But size alone didn't scare the experts. It was their formation that caused unease. They flew with precision, holding perfect distance from each other. They shifted like a single organism, responding to some silent command. Some people in the room felt a strange sense of admiration. Whoever had built these ships understood engineering far beyond anything on Earth. But admiration alone meant nothing in the face of potential danger. As the hours passed, tension rose. The fleet crossed the distance slowly but steadily. Sensors captured more details. The hulls of the vessels reflected light in an unnatural way, almost like they were made of materials unknown to human science. Some structures on the ships glowed faintly, pulsing like heartbeats. The people watching the screens felt their nerves tighten. Any hope that the visitors might simply pass by was fading. Every movement showed intention. Every shift confirmed they were closing in on Earth's region of space. Inside the coordination center, a decision had to be made: reveal the project to the world or keep the public unaware until the last moment. After a long discussion, the choice became clear. People had the right to know. If something happened, they needed to be informed, not left in confusion. Governments around the world prepared a joint announcement. When the message finally reached the public, confusion spread like wildfire. People wanted answers. Some believed it was a joke. Others thought it was an exaggeration. But as more official statements came from different countries, the truth became unavoidable. Something was coming, something no one had ever seen before. And Earth was ready in a way nobody had imagined got within minutes. News channels across the planet displayed animations of the approaching objects. People gathered around screens everywhere in homes, schools, shops, hospitals, and streets. It was the first time humanity realized that the long silence of the stars might be ending. While people talked, argued, and questioned, the defense team continued preparing. They couldn't afford fear or panic. They had tasks, deadlines, calculations. Every second mattered. The orbital defense array was now fully active. All systems were online. The secret project that had been hidden for years was finally awake. The people behind the system didn't know exactly what would happen next, but they understood one thing deeply. Whatever was coming toward Earth, humanity would not face it helplessly. The world had built its shield in silence, and soon that shield would be tested for the first time in history. For years, people on Earth had wondered what aliens, if they existed, might think of humans. Some imagined peaceful explorers. Others imagined wise civilizations far ahead in knowledge. But the truth was very different from all the hopeful guesses. Far beyond the orbit of Mars, in the deep cold of space, the approaching fleet had its own beliefs. The beings commanding those vessels, who humans would later call the Torthic, did not think of Earth as a place deserving respect. To them, Earth was a simple world, the kind that appeared all over the galaxy. A planet covered in water and oxygen, full of life, but none of that mattered to the Torthic. They cared only about strength, and in their eyes, humanity was weak. Their scanners had been studying Earth from far away for years. They had seen humans fight among themselves, argue over borders, and waste resources. They saw humans as emotional creatures who acted on instinct instead of logic. They believed humans were too divided to defend themselves. The Torthic had conquered dozens of young civilizations before, and Earth was just another target on their long list. To their leaders, this was a simple mission. A small fleet was more than enough. They didn't even send their full force. They sent what they called a vanguard, a first wave, a warning to the planet they planned to control. In their mind, even this small fleet was more than Earth deserved. Inside one of the alien vessels, their commanders studied long-distance images of Earth. They saw cities, oceans, mountains, and the lights of human technology. But instead of admiration, they felt disbelief. How could such a bright world belong to a species so unprepared? They thought Earth looked beautiful, but beauty meant nothing to them. They came for resources, for expansion, and for control. They believed humans would surrender quickly. Some of the alien crew even discussed how they would divide Earth's regions once the takeover was complete. Their confidence was unshakable. Why wouldn't it be? They had weapons with power equal to small stars. They had shields that could survive meteor storms. They had traveled across star systems without facing serious threats. To them, Earth was nothing more than a quiet stop along a long journey of domination. But there was one thing the aliens did not know. They had underestimated something far more dangerous than any weapon. They underestimated human determination. They underestimated unity. They underestimated the unpredictable spirit humans carried within them, something the aliens had never seen in any species before. And most importantly, they underestimated how fast humans could adapt when their very survival was at stake. Back on Earth, the people watching the fleet could sense something strange. The way the ships moved was not cautious or curious. The formation looked like a marching army. Each vessel held its position with mathematical perfection. When one shifted, all shifted. When one slowed, all slowed. No hesitation, no uncertainty. It was the behavior of a confident invader. Inside the Global Command Center, specialists studied every detail. They compared the fleet's speed with previous calculations. Something about the movement bothered them. The fleet wasn't just coming closer. It was adjusting its path, almost like it was preparing for a large maneuver. Someone watching the live data pointed out the obvious. "They're preparing for entry," he said. The whole room went silent. Even though the aliens didn't say a single word, their actions spoke clearly. They were coming to take control. But while the aliens believed humans were weak, humanity had been preparing in silence for years. The aliens had no idea that their earlier signals had been detected. They did not know about the orbital defense array. They didn't know humans had already built a plan for the impossible. They didn't know humans had studied fragments of mysterious technology from old probes that had drifted into the solar system. Aliens thought humans were blind, but humans had been watching them the entire time. The difference was simple. Humans didn't talk about their preparations. They acted quietly, far away from public eyes, and kept every important detail hidden. While the aliens assumed Earth was unguarded, in truth, Earth had never been more ready. Yet the advantage wasn't only in technology. It was in mindset. Humans were not perfect. They fought and disagreed, yes. But when a threat loomed over the entire planet, one that didn't care about borders, languages, history, or beliefs, humans pulled together in a way no alien species could imagine. Every scientist, engineer, operator, and strategist came forward without hesitation. They worked without sleep, without complaint, and without the need for orders. They knew what was at risk. The aliens believed division made humans weak. But in reality, division disappeared the moment the threat became clear. And that was the first sign that the aliens had miscalculated. The second mistake came from their overconfidence. They sent a small fleet, not expecting any resistance beyond a few primitive rockets or missiles. They didn't bother to send the full invasion force. The idea that humans might fight back successfully never crossed their minds. Inside their command ship, the Torthek talked confidently about what they would do once Earth belonged to them. They discussed how to use Earth's resources. They talked about stripping the planet of certain minerals. They even discussed what to do with humans after the takeover. To them, humans were not a threat. Humans were an obstacle, and obstacles could be removed. They believed Earth's defenses were nothing compared to their technology. They believed humans lacked the discipline needed for war. They believed fear would break the planet's unity. Everything they believed was wrong. On Earth, fear didn't break unity. It created it. Every nation, every agency, every skilled person came together. There were no arguments about who was in charge. Everyone focused on survival, and the idea of survival pushed people to their limits. Meanwhile, the alien fleet continued moving with slow confidence. They crossed the distance between planets like it meant nothing. They passed the edge of the asteroid belt, still keeping perfect formation. Their engines glowed with a cold blue light, steady and silent. From the human perspective, it was like watching a storm slowly move across the horizon, knowing it was heading straight toward them. As the aliens got closer, their scans focused on Earth's orbit. They noticed satellites, but they didn't understand their purpose. The devices humans had built looked too small, too weak, too scattered to be a threat. The aliens didn't realize that some of these satellites were decoys, and that the true weapons were positioned carefully, hidden in shadows, disguised as harmless equipment. Humans had learned from history. Never reveal your full strength before the enemy arrives. Aliens saw weakness where there was strategy. They saw disorder where there was unity. They saw confusion where there was focus. As the fleet reached halfway between Mars and the asteroid belt, the alien commanders prepared a silent message. They hadn't sent it yet. They were waiting to enter Mars' orbit before announcing their presence. To them, Earth didn't deserve an early greeting. It was a show of dominance, a way to demonstrate their authority. But what they didn't know was that every move they made was being tracked by thousands of human eyes. Inside a monitoring room deep in a secure facility, someone watched a set of numbers on a screen. The alien fleet had shifted again, another coordinated movement. The person monitoring stared for a long moment before speaking into a communication line. "They're preparing for their descent," he said quietly. The message spread through the entire command center. Everyone began preparing for the moment the aliens came close enough for Earth to respond. Humanity had plans. Humanity had defenses. And humanity had a determination the aliens were completely unaware of. The aliens believed the battle would be simple, but they were about to learn something they had never learned from any species before. Humans do not give up. Humans do not bow. Humans fight back even when the odds look impossible. And the aliens were only days away from finding out just how wrong their assumptions had been. The moment everyone on Earth had been waiting for finally arrived. The alien fleet crossed the invisible line near Mars, the point where the defense team knew action had to begin. The aliens still believed nothing stood in their way. Their formation held the same perfect shape, like a row of silent giants moving toward a target they believed was helpless. But humanity was far from helpless. Every system in the orbital defense array had been tested, checked, and rechecked. Operators sat at their stations with tense shoulders, eyes sharp and focused. They were not warriors by nature, but the situation forced them to become protectors of their world. Many of them had never imagined they would one day watch a real invasion unfold on their screens. Yet here they were, preparing for something no human in history had ever faced. The alien ships continued drifting closer, unaware that hundreds of hidden human machines were watching their every move. The defense team had rehearsed the moment over and over again. They knew exactly what to do and when to do it. Still, the air in the command center felt heavy, as if every breath carried the weight of the planet. The order came quietly. It wasn't shouted, because there was no need. Everyone was already prepared. The person in charge spoke a few calm words into the system, and with that single message, Earth's secret defenses awakened not far above the planet. Long metal structures that had looked like harmless satellites suddenly shifted. Panels slid out silently. Hidden compartments opened. The robotic systems inside came alive, every part moving with smooth precision. Small lights blinked in patterns that only the AI understood. In the dark vacuum of space, Earth's shield quietly took shape. The first strike did not look dramatic from Earth's surface. No giant flash in the sky, no loud sound. Instead, it began with a silent beam of light, thin, sharp, and almost invisible. One of the orbital lasers targeted the lead alien vessel, firing a burst of concentrated energy that traveled faster than sound could ever hope to move. Inside the alien ship, alarms lit up instantly. The beam struck the ship's exterior with brutal accuracy. Their shields, which they believed were impenetrable, flickered. The surface of the vessel glowed bright white for a split second. The aliens had never expected resistance, let alone resistance powerful enough to damage their armor. Their confidence cracked. Before they could recover, a second wave of attacks followed. This time, long metal projectiles, launched from a rail system hidden near the moon. The rods traveled at a speed that defied normal understanding. They weren't explosive. They didn't need to be. Their impact force alone was enough to tear through metal stronger than anything found on Earth. One projectile struck a smaller alien craft on the edge of the formation. The ship shattered like fragile glass. Pieces scattered across space, silently drifting into the darkness. Back in the command center, the humans saw the first alien ship break apart. No one cheered. It wasn't the moment for celebration. It was the moment they realized something even more serious. The aliens would fight back. Inside the remaining vessels, the alien commanders scrambled to regain control. They had never imagined a species like humans could produce weapons strong enough to pierce their defenses. They began adjusting their formation, trying to analyze where the attacks were coming from. But the orbital defense array was designed for exactly this. The AI read their movements instantly, calculating the aliens' new pattern before the aliens had even completed the maneuver. Humans had something the aliens didn't: unpredictability mixed with rapid adaptation. The AI predicted the aliens' next steps and set Earth's weapons into motion before they even finished turning. More rail projectiles fired. More beams struck. The aliens, realizing the danger, activated stronger shields, ones they had hoped never to use unless they faced advanced civilizations. But it didn't matter. The shots kept coming, each one hitting a weak point the AI had identified during its rapid analysis. The alien fleet began losing stability. They were trained, powerful, and technologically advanced, but their training had focused on overwhelming force, never on defense. They expected their targets to surrender or flee. They had never planned for a situation where they were the ones under attack. The human operators kept working with calm determination. They had been taught not to panic, not to hesitate. They monitored energy levels, projectile paths, temperature readings. They watched as the alien vessels attempted to scan Earth's weapons, only to find that many of them were hidden behind decoys. One alien ship attempted to rush forward, breaking formation to close the distance. It wanted to reach a position where it could examine a potential human installation. But the AI predicted that too. A group of small robotic satellites changed their path and suddenly surrounded the advancing vessel. They weren't armed with heavy weapons, but they didn't need them. Their function was to scramble signals, overload systems, and blind the enemy. In seconds, the alien ship's sensors went dark. A rail projectile struck it from behind. The ship folded inward, its glowing engines sputtering before going silent forever. The aliens had never experienced anything like this. They were used to taking down civilizations that barely had basic space travel. They had seen fear crush weaker species before the real battle even began. But humans did not behave like the enemies the aliens were used to. Humans fought with everything they had, with all their creativity, intelligence, and desperation mixed together. And there was something else the aliens did not understand. Humans fought with emotion. Not the emotion that weakens, but the kind that strengthens. They fought because they wanted to live. They fought because their families lived below. Their children, their homes, their memories, their entire world. The aliens had come to conquer a planet, but humans were defending their entire existence. As the battle continued near Mars, the alien fleet grew more chaotic. Their formation crumbled. Their communication lines became strained. Some ships tried to retreat, but their engines had been hit. Others attempted to regroup, but the AI cut off their paths, predicting where they would go and striking first. From Earth's orbit to the Moon's hidden stations, the AEGI system worked like a single mind guiding thousands of machines. Lasers fired with perfect timing. Projectiles launched at angles that seemed impossible. Robotic platforms moved like swarms of insects, blocking escape routes before the aliens even turned. One by one, the alien vessels fell. Some broke apart quietly. Some exploded in silent bursts of light. Pieces of their technology drifted through space, small fragments of a once powerful fleet that believed humans were simple and weak. Inside the command center, people watched every impact carefully. Some felt relief. Some felt fear mixed with disbelief. They had defeated ships from another world, something no human had ever imagined in their lifetime. And yet, they knew the battle wasn't just about victory. It was about sending a message. Earth was not unprotected. Humans were not prey that far from Earth's surface. Near the edge of Mars' orbit, the last remaining alien ship tried to send a warning message to its home world. But the signal never completed. A beam from one of the orbital platforms cut through the ship like a soft breeze cutting through mist. The vessel dimmed, then shut down completely. The silence that followed felt unreal. Human systems scanned the area for any remaining threats. Nothing moved. Nothing glowed. Nothing approached. The alien fleet that had come with confidence and arrogance had been destroyed before even reaching Mars. Back on Earth, people waited anxiously for an update. When the final report arrived, the world stood together in shock and relief. The impossible had happened. Humanity had faced an interstellar threat for the first time in history, and won. The sky looked the same, but everything had changed. The people in the command center sat back slowly. Some let out long breaths they had been holding for hours. Others simply stared at the screens, unable to believe what they had witnessed. This wasn't the end of the story, but for the first time, humanity learned something powerful. They were not just survivors. They were capable of defending their world. And now, every remaining civilization out there would know one thing: Earth was not to be underestimated. When the last piece of the enemy fleet broke apart near the orbit of Mars, a deep silence spread through every control room on Earth. People stared at their screens, not sure if they should celebrate, cry, or simply sit down and breathe. After so many days of tension and fear, it felt unreal that the danger was gone. For a moment, no one moved. It was as if the entire planet held its breath, waiting for someone else to confirm it. Then, slowly, messages started coming in from observatories and defense stations. All sensors showed the same thing. The invading fleet had been destroyed before it could even get close to Earth. But even in that moment of relief, no one felt like shouting. It wasn't the kind of victory that brings loud celebrations. It felt heavy. It felt like something huge had shifted inside humanity, and no one knew what would come after this. People simply stood there, letting the reality sink in. The threat was gone, yes, but the world they woke up in tomorrow would not be the same world they lived in yesterday. In the days that followed, teams across the planet worked day and night to collect every possible trace of the enemy fleet. Drones were sent into deep orbit. Special ships, designed years earlier but never used until now, were launched to gather fragments floating near Mars. Humanity wanted answers. They wanted to know why this species had come, how strong their main forces were, and what they planned for the rest of the galaxy. Everyone understood that this vanguard fleet was only the first wave. If they came once, they could come again. And next time, they might send something much bigger. Scientists studied the alien debris like treasure hunters searching for clues. Every piece of metal, every burned circuit, every melted shard was examined under microscopes. It didn't take long before they found proof that chilled everyone who saw it. The aliens had a long list of targeted worlds, and Earth was just one of them. The fleet that came was meant to test humanity. The main armada was still somewhere far away, preparing its next moves. When this information spread through command centers, no one needed to be told what it meant. They had won this time, but the real challenge had not even started. Back on Earth, the atmosphere was strange. Life continued, but everything felt slightly different. People walked in the streets with a new awareness. It was the feeling that their planet was not small anymore. It was part of something bigger. For centuries, humans had looked up at the stars with curiosity and wonder. But now they looked with understanding. They were not alone, and the universe was not a peaceful place. It had dangers far beyond anything they had imagined. Yet under all the fear, something else was growing. A sense of unity that had not been seen on Earth for many generations. Old rivalries between nations suddenly felt childish. Past conflicts seemed tiny in comparison to what humanity had just faced. Leaders across the world held meetings, not to argue, but to plan. They spoke with calm voices and clear intentions. They all knew that the planet had one shared future now. Either they stood together, or they fell alone. There was no middle option. As the days passed, more agreements were signed. More borders softened. More resources were shared. Humanity didn't become perfect overnight, but something inside them shifted enough to matter. And that was more than anyone expected. One of the biggest changes came when the Alcyon world decided to create a unified defense command. It wasn't controlled by any single country. It was built by everyone. Engineers from different continents worked side by side. Scientists from places that once competed with each other now traded ideas freely. Even ordinary citizens felt the change. People who had never cared about space suddenly discussed orbital stations, deep scanner networks, and long-range warning systems. The idea of defending Earth was no longer a job for only a few nations. It was something all humans wanted to help with in one way or another. The remains of the alien ships provided technology, more advanced than anything humans had ever seen. But instead of keeping it secret or locking it behind classified doors, the new global alliance decided to study it together. Research centers were set up in different parts of the world, all connected through a shared information system. Knowledge began to flow like never before. Energy systems improved. Engines became more efficient. Communication lines became faster. Humanity was stepping into a new era, and everyone could feel it. But the victory also left many questions behind. What kind of species were the aliens? Why did they want Earth so badly? What did they do to other planets on their list? The clues found in the debris suggested that they were an empire expanding aggressively across star systems. They didn't negotiate. They didn't communicate. They simply conquered and moved forward. And that meant Earth needed to prepare for the day they returned. This realization didn't create panic. Instead, it created determination. People were no longer thinking only about survival. They were thinking about strength, about building something greater than anyone had imagined before. They wanted to be ready to defend not just their home, but also the freedom of any world the aliens might threaten. Over time, the word Earth started to feel different when people said it. It was no longer just the name of a planet. It was the name of a species that had stood together when it mattered the most. A species that refused to bow down. A species that surprised the invaders before they could even reach Mars. That moment became a legend. It was told in schools, shared in documentaries, remembered in quiet conversations at night. Humanity had done something incredible, and everyone knew it. Months passed, and the global defense system expanded. New satellites were placed in orbit. The moon station became larger and more capable. Plans were drafted for deep space platforms, built far from Earth, but still connected to the same protective network. Everything pointed toward one goal, making sure the planet would never again be caught off guard. On the personal level, people changed too. Families felt closer. Communities talked openly about the future of the planet. Children grew up with a new sense of responsibility and pride. Even though the universe now seemed more dangerous, it also felt more meaningful. Humanity had a place in it, and that place was earned through courage. And while most of Earth celebrated peace returning, those working in space defense never relaxed. They monitored the skies every hour. They tracked every unidentified signal and every suspicious movement in the stars. They knew the enemy could return at any time. But they also knew something else. The aliens would not find the same Earth again. The next time they came, they would face a stronger, wiser, more united species that no one wished for war. No one wanted another attack. But if it happened, humanity wouldn't hide or hesitate. They would stand firm, just like they did near Mars. And this time, they would be ready for anything. As the years moved forward, the story of how humanity stood together became the foundation of a new identity. People didn't think of themselves as separate nations anymore. They thought of themselves as humans first. That shift did more for the planet than any treaty or agreement ever had. It created hope. It created purpose. And it created a future worth fighting for. In the end, the message that echoed across Earth and beyond the solar system was simple. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not easy to defeat. And anyone who tried to conquer their home would learn the same lesson the aliens learned near Mars. Earth was awake now. And humanity was ready to defend it, no matter who came next.